Cool. Sounds good. Let's see. And the question should be in the Facebook chat too.
Yeah, yep, I got it.
What types of books would you recommend for kids and teens?
Yeah, I think like right now I'm thinking about books more along the lines of like personal development in a lot of ways. And kind of like more like developing character, like personal character, not like the characters in the books. So obviously it's good to have books that have well-developed characters. So I would say that really choosing books that kind of focus on kids' character and books that don't shy away from maybe asking kids to confront difficult topics, but asking them to confront it in a way that helps them grow as people, and not shying away from books that are maybe more complicated in terms of language, because I think when books are written beautifully, it does draw kids in a lot deeper, and that helps them along a lot of lines of development. So as far as like types, just really beautiful, engaging books, across a variety of genres, because a lot of different genres help kids engage with challenges. And, for example, like a fantasy novel helps kids confront, ideas of good and evil in a much safer way, because they're not going to have to go out and battle a dragon or whatever. But that starts to lay the foundation for what does like evil look like at its most exaggerated forms, and what does good look like at its most exaggerated forms. And fantasy is like a really great way to show the black and white, and then start gradually moving on to grayer areas. So I don't know if that's condensed down to a type, but that's what I've been looking for in books lately for the classroom.
How old?
Well, in the past 7 months, I've taught 5th grade, 7th grade, and 7th through 10th grade. Right now I'm working on curriculum for 3rd through 8th grade. So yeah, kind of all over the place.
That's cool. um so yeah, like I remember when I was like 11 that some of my friends were getting into Harry Potter, and they were like reading it for the first time. They were like super engrossed, and they were really excited for it to be like turned into a movie and everything like that. And they're like really, really excited about it. And it like sank in well, and they could remember it all. And like there was a lot of retention going on, and there wasn't necessarily illustrations. So I feel like kind of what you were saying with the fantasy, how that's kind of good. I feel bad I haven't read any Rick O'Riordan, because everyone's like Percy Jackson. Would that be a book that you would promote in your classroom?
Actually, probably not necessarily in my classroom. Because so I taught ancient Greece and history to the 5th graders especially, and that's kind of like the age where they would start getting into Percy Jackson. But we struggled a lot in that class with like the kids fighting me on like the myths that were being taught, because they were like, well, I read this version in this one story, and I'd have to be like, okay, well, that one story was written thousands of years after what we're talking about, so like that's not the truth, like what the Greeks believed. And right now we're talking about what the Greeks believed. So actually, even though I think it's kind of like a good gateway book to getting interested in those things, I think it can get like complicated to pair that alongside ancient cultures. So at least personally in my classroom, we're both in Latin and in history. We really like dig deep into the ancient cultures. I would actually play Percy Jackson. But for kids who aren't currently studying the ancient civilizations, there's like, yeah, so many engaging parts of Percy Jackson. And I loved Percy Jackson. That's what got me into mythology, which is what got me into Latin, which is like the main reason I got into, or one of the biggest reasons why I got into teaching. So yeah, it's definitely like a gateway drug or gateway book, whatever.
Yeah. um uh um um no, yeah, I feel like we need more Greek mythology books, and maybe even like modern day books, but are based in Greek mythology or something like that. Like I think that'd be kind of a cool idea. I guess that's kind of what Percy Jackson is.
Yeah.
But maybe even like different. Or
Yeah.
yeah. Um, um, yeah. No. Yeah, I grew up really liking kind of Greek mythology type stuff.
Yeah.
The books. If you're familiar with the author Madeline Miller at all,
Oh yeah. I mean, I haven't read her, but yeah, definitely heard of her.
so she is local. It's in Pennsylvania. She went to Shipley, or she taught at Shipley, and I think she lives in Delaware County, which is a neighbor of Montgomery County.
Yeah.
So it's close by. So no, she wrote Circe, which I started reading, which is really good. But you have to be kind of in the right mindset to it. Honestly, if I listened to the audiobook, I think I would probably really like it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And Song of Achilles. So no, probably not this year, but maybe in the future you could introduce those into your classroom.
Yeah, definitely for the older kids that would be, well, I think it's like yeah, in some ways teaching classics is hard because I'm such a big mythology nerd that it's like to teach it at like a high school level or like a middle school or elementary school level, it's like I have to turn off all of these like parts of my brains. It's like, okay, let's dig into like deep like critical theory of these myths, because it's like, wait a second, no, they need like the basic, why did the Greeks have, like, where do we think these myths came from, like what are the bare bones of these myths, and why, like how did they come about, what does this say about Greek culture, and that's it. Like you can't start like dumping all of these different schools of um mythology, like critical theory on 11-year-olds. They're just not ready for it.
No, yeah. If it's just kind of there like subtly and they're kind of
Yeah.
with it, then it kind of does wash over them and they're exposed to it. And then maybe later when they're ready to learn like more about the history, they can. And they already have a more baseline.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. And both the school that I was at and the school I'm helping launch this year, they both take like a circular approach. So, for example, at the one school, the kindergartners start learning about ancient Greece, and then the fifth graders learn about ancient, well, not just Greece, but ancient cultures. Fifth graders learn ancient cultures, and then it's cycled back through more big picture through all of their years in in high school, in junior high and high school. And then like, first grade does like Renaissance, medieval Renaissance, sixth grade does medieval Renaissance, and then it's all now part of the bigger picture for high school and so on. So I think like then it goes to like world history in third grade. But yeah, it's all cycled, and it's all kind of, so for example, for my fifth grade class in history, they're learning about ancient cultures. In literature, they read the Golden Goblet, the Cat of Bubastis, the Bronze Bow, where it's like going back to all of those ancient cultures as well. And then science is earth science. So they're learning these myths about like how the Greeks thought that the world was created, while they're learning about how volcanoes are formed. And they're learning about the constellations while they're reading the myths that the constellations are based on or like named after in literature. So yeah, there's very much like a circular approach that allows kids to build on a foundation as they move through various stages and stages.
I think that's good. I've never really thought about it that way, but I guess it's the difference between being the student and the teacher. So you said that's this. You said that's for the circular learning. You said that's what it is.
Yeah, like a circular model. It's really present in a lot of like alternative teaching theories. So like Charlotte Mason, Waldorf, it's very much a classical school model.
I'll keep that in mind. Since I'm trying to become a teacher now, so that's kind of what I'm working on. Probably special ed, because I don't think that I could teach in front of a classroom. I think just being with a few kids at a time.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like yeah, I just think that it would be a little bit too hard. So
Yeah. Yeah, my classroom starting off was only 9 kids, and I'm so grateful, because I don't know. I don't think I could have handled a bigger classroom right out the gate. But I also like, so my younger brother was in special ed, and he had some like really terrible, like truly terrible special ed teachers. So there's definitely a need for yeah, like just really good special ed teachers who genuinely care. So it makes me really happy to hear that's what you're looking into.
yeah, um, um, yeah, I would really try to help and try to, yeah, yeah, try to assess. Uh, you were always more skilled at policy than I was. Um, uh, um, like that's just like something that I have to take time to learn, like the act structure and No Child Left Behind, and just the really big like policies and the rules. Uh, um, yeah. So I just kind of still have to learn those a little bit more. But
Yeah, absolutely. Very
yeah,
muddy waters in a lot of ways.
yeah. um um yeah, I'm kind of getting that. Um I'm kind of getting that impression. um mm, um mm, um from like some of the policies, because like uh kind of from what I'm reading, like it's talking about how um they want to make sure it's kind of like a developmental issue, or it's like a learning disability rather than a language barrier. Because I
Right.
guess that's different services, like English as a second language, or if you're a language learner,
Yeah.
um that's different services. But they might need the special education uh help too,
Uh,
because they could also have learning this, because I think oftentimes like kids are just get like pigeonholed, and it's just like the language barrier. But no, there could be learning problems too.
yeah, 100%.
So that's just kind of something that needs to be evaluated and worked on in the future.
Yeah.
Yeah. Uh, mm, um, um, that's cool.
Yeah,
um,
yeah. And I think like, you know, probably something that helps is really strong partnerships between the ESL departments and the special ed departments, and being able to really work closely together and cooperate and
yeah,
share ideas, bounce things off each other, and really getting to know individual students and their specific needs, and keeping like a good line of communication.
yeah. Um, um, yeah. No, like lines of communication open, maybe similar lesson plans and curriculum. Make sure they know what they're teaching. YouTube videos, like um, so the special ed teachers can see how the ESL teachers teach, because like sometimes they're not in the classroom, so
Yeah.
sometimes they don't know how they teach unless you like sit in. And but if you're sitting in, like sometimes they put on like a special show for like the teacher, they know they're being observed, so they're on like really good behavior or something, or they try to do something they don't usually do.
Yeah.
So if they made like individual videos or just filmed them teaching, um you might get a different reaction, or a different, if you could see them like one-on-one with students or something, or you knew the methods, or you knew how they did it, you could do it similarly. Or because like sometimes it's technique, or sometimes it's how they do it,
Yeah.
that really gets through to kids. Um uh um or sometimes it's just structure, or these like special ed is essentially just more attention and more scaffolding
Hmm.
and an easier setting. So it's just supposed to be easier, it's supposed to be more focused, more tailored to the needs of the students.
Yeah.
But you really need to focus on how they're learning something, or the technique, or like why are they perceiving that way, like what are they seeing in their heads when they're reading
Yeah.
this, or what kind of connections are they making, or what TV shows do they watch at home, or how is this like connected or referenced to this or something, or like where does this come from.
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh um I guess during the pandemic we kind of got more education on how kids are at home. So
That's true. I hadn't really thought of that.
it can be helpful. So
Yeah.
yeah. Um, yeah. Mm, um, mm, uh,
Yeah,
mm,
those are really great points. The thing about when you mentioned like being able to observe other teachers, like I feel like in libraries, there was a lot of, going and seeing like the other librarians do story time, or going to a nearby library if you could and observe them doing story time or whatever. But in teaching, there's just not that same opportunity. And in a lot of ways, that's really hard because you guys are working, like you're all working so closely with the same kids, but a lot of times there isn't as many opportunities to create that sense of continuity. And I think with like, kids who are struggling, having a sense of continuity is really important because, if you've got them applying certain methods for processing information or certain, study techniques or whatever in one class, but then in another class, like that's just totally absent. It's like, well, poor kid, like how can you expect them to learn, like 5 different ways of approaching material when they're overwhelmed with just trying to figure out a way that makes sense to the way they perceive the world. So yeah, those are like really, really excellent points, really like interesting things to think about.
yeah, just kind of the bigger picture, or like how is the kid like thinking it right? And then what can make them read faster,
Yeah.
or like perceive it differently, or what
Yeah.
kind of stimuli make them do things a certain way. And I think it's great that you play music in your classroom. I think that's excellent. In high school, learned that classical music can stimulate brain function and focus and intelligence. I'm not sure if the intelligence part is real, but um, 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 uh,
Yeah, and one of the fun things was, like I said, we with like the models that my schools use, like we try to show the interconnectedness of subjects and disciplines. So like
okay,
in my 5th grade class, the big piece for the year was like the planets by Holst, because we were learning about space and science, but we were also reading these myths. And so it's like, why does the Jupiter piece sound like, so triumphant and kind of like powerful? Um, why is Mercury like a little more, I don't know a good word, like not sneaky, but lighter or whatever. Um, so that's definitely something that I'm trying to think of moving forward, especially because I think the plan is for me to also be teaching a music appreciation class this fall. So it's like, oh yeah, we're definitely gonna have to figure out how to work that in as well.
that's really cool, Mindy. You could go back to the classics. You could go back to like Schoolhouse Rock,
Oh yeah.
with the Interplanet Janet, which I think was like that was my favorite. And just add the edit that Pluto's technically not a planet anymore, but it's like,
100%. Yeah. Though I still am like really deeply wounded by Pluto's demotion.
And apparently it's like just like a dwarf planet or like a half planet or something. So
Yeah.
it's still more a planet than like a star, or like
Right.
or like or like another thing in the universe. So
Yeah.
it still has like planet properties. So it probably is worth discussing in that way.
Yeah. 100%. Yeah.
But if you're just teaching the kids the planets, there's only 8. So
Yeah. That's actually also such a great connection to Greek mythology because it's like, here's all the planets, and then we have like Hades slash Pluto over here that's kind of just shuffled off to the underworld and ignored by the rest of the gods.
uh, Um, mm, mm, mm. Yeah. Like, yeah, Pluto just kind of gets neglected.
Yep. Yeah.
I feel like an assignment you could give a kid is like justify why Pluto should still or be a planet. Say it used to be. Justify why it still should be, and you can get into like the properties of like what makes planets.
Yeah, that is such a great point. And I was trying to think of what their big science capstone project would be. So there we go.
Oh,
Having those like big picture questions is such a great idea.
yeah. Um, and it can also make them think about like the planets collectively as a unit.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely.
um, uh, um, mm, cool. Um, uh, um, mm, let's see. Um, 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 if you had 3 books that you would want to put in your um mm, mm, uh, um uh, um, if you had 3 books that you would want to put in your language arts program, which would they be?
That's such a good question. So I read Heidi with my fifth graders this year, and it
Cool.
was just, yeah, it was just such a beautiful experience. A lot of people think, or I think like a prevailing attitude is like, oh, that's a girl book, so we can't like read the girl book because the boys won't be
Mm,
interested in it. But in a lot of
yeah.
ways, like, the boys were maybe almost even more engaged than the girls were. And I think like, so I think some of the things that were made the book so meaningful was like, I was teaching kids in Philadelphia. So they all lived for the most part in cities their whole lives. So like this idea of being surrounded by like this beauty and these like wide open spaces, and just all this room to be a child, they really engaged with that idea, and they really latched on to how embracing like nature does so much like feed the soul. So that was one thing. And then there's like, kind of all of these subplots with Peter,
Mm,
this like super
mm,
mischievous goat herd that like all of
mm.
the boys were like, oh, what trouble is Peter gonna get into next? But
Oh,
then yeah, and then Heidi is just like a really admirable character. And there's like an opportunity to see um like Heidi kind of calls the kids to embrace, certain traits and certain characteristics. And I think kids really
mm,
respond well to that. Same with Narnia, actually. So I'd probably say The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, just because I've also seen how kids like it's almost like the Pevensies or like the sorting house from Harry Potter. So there's like the character that you can like really relate to. And I think that those characters also kind of call kids to be better. So it's like, yeah, like I personally wish I were more like Lucy, but I know I'm like Susan, and at least in like The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe and The Horse and His Boy, it's like Susan exhibits all these like traits of gentleness and kindness. And those are like good things to try to emulate. Or like Edmund, he exhibits humility, in admitting when he messed up, and like he grows up to be very wise and very admirable, and the people of Narnia love him, and Peter's like brave. And so yeah, so there's all these traits that I think that like, yeah, kids do want to see themselves in books, absolutely, but I think kids also want to be challenged to be something more. And when you have characters that do reflect who you are. They make you believe that you can also be something more. And I think that's something that's actually really great about both Narnia and Heidi, is that you've got like kind of a mix of personalities. So you can see somebody who resembles you, but you can also see somebody who's like the best version of yourself. It's somebody who messes up, but who learns how to navigate messing up. So those would be two. And then for older kids, I kind of want to say one of the books from the Lord of the Rings, but that would take like a whole semester, and especially a whole semester just to do it justice. Let's see, let me think about, there's too many to choose from, and that's my problem, is like, how can I narrow it down to just three? I would probably say The Secret Garden. I keep going back to that because I think it's similar in themes to Heidi, where there's the characters just discover an ability to find beauty in every situation. And for kids going through like hard situations, I think that's really important, is helping them train their eyes to seek out things that are beautiful and to hold on to those as a symbol of hope. And again, that goes back to both Heidi and Narnia as well. That's a theme for sure. In both of them is just the knowledge that there's something beautiful in the world. And it's important to hold on to that no matter how bleak things seem, which is true of Lord of the Rings too. That's like literally a quote from Lord of the Rings practically.
Nice. The way you're talking about The Secret Garden, have you read any Jane Austen?
Oh yeah. Yep.
Kind of reminds me of like kind of Mansfield Park.
That's exactly what I was thinking. Yep, 100%.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think Secret Garden is really good, and it is pretty timeless too. So it holds up very well. And so does Mansfield Park. But
100%.
How Mansfield Park is written with the conventions and the way Austen writes, probably like, I'm sure that a lot of girls who are like skilled readers, like I'm sure there's a lot of 11 and 12-year-olds that could just like read a Jane Austen book like that, just like they could do it. But
yeah,
typically boys don't read as much, and some like struggle reading and stuff. So maybe like 14 or 15 for boys, maybe 11 to 12 for girls. So
yeah, absolutely. And I think that something I feel very strongly about is that it's really good for kids to read books that have boy main characters and to read books that have girl main characters, because like, well, for one, it's like you can still like the book just because the character doesn't have the same gender you have, but like you might find really cool ways that you relate to those characters. Like I think a lot of my students really related to Heidi because they were like, man, I wish I were like running around in the Alps right now, like barefoot and just like hanging out with goats. That would be so great. And it didn't matter that they were boys. Like that's just a cool thing to do. But I also think it just allows for kids to become more comfortable with like, oh yeah, like, well, when they do see these commonalities, it's like there are like a lot of ways in which we think similarly. And so it doesn't like put kids into like a girls versus boys camp. And I think it just makes like friendships a lot easier and less complicated, instead of being like the whole like, oh, girls have cooties, oh, boys have cooties or whatever. So yeah, so many reasons why I just think like really good.
No. think that strong female protagonist thing is like totally good in that way, and to have boys like get interested in like a strong lead female character that young too. Yeah, I definitely, yeah, reading um reading Gone with the Wind in library school, I was surprised how good it was, and how good like the landscapes and like the setting, and how well the female protagonist is written, like so like spunky and like full of life, and like really like fascinating, like so interesting. Like she's such an interesting character. So I would say like Gone with the Wind would be a pretty good one that I would really like to add.
Yeah. Have you ever read anything by George Eliot?
No.
Okay, Drew, I highly recommend her books. I think you would just really connect with them in a lot of ways. Actually, like her books, so when in my undergrad, I was a literature major, and I focused on Victorian literature. And my professor he'd written his thesis in grad school on her, so I studied like a lot of George Eliot. But yeah, so I kind of like, that's kind of through her books is where I really started kind of like figuring out what I think it means to be like a person who lives in the world with other people. And I really think that's the aim of teaching literature. Like, sure, you're teaching how to construct sentences and how to form, written thoughts, and you're learning basic plot elements and things like that. But for kids who aren't going to go on to study literature in college, like what are the lasting things that they can get from literature? And I think that's like learning how to be a human who lives in the world with other humans, and learning how to be a well-developed human, and an empathetic human. So yeah, so like I would love someday to teach like senior, like maybe like AP literature, and do George Eliot, because like they're chonky books. There's like 500 pages or whatever, but just so worth it. Just so worth it.
Hang on 1 second. Okay. Yeah. That sounds good. I'll definitely keep that in mind. Yeah. Mm, mm, let's see. Let's see what's going on. Let's see. And I'd probably also put Brown Girl Dreaming, Roll of Thunder, Hear My Cry, Vanity Fair, and The Outsiders.
Oh yeah, those are all such good. Oh my gosh, those are really good choices. Yeah, 100%.
For Vanity Fair, it would be the way it's written. I think Zachary has a very interesting way of storytelling and narrating, and it's almost like he's like breaking the fourth wall too. It's almost like he's like talking directly to the reader, as if it's not like happening in real time, as if, okay, I already wrote it and then I'm explaining what's going on. So, and that's really interesting, and I think it's really witty. I think it's really funny. And I personally tend to get like wrapped up in books that have that really good kind of narrative and that really good narrator. Like one of my favorite books is still Catcher in the Rye,
Yeah.
because I thought it was so funny. I just thought it was like hilarious, and I'm just like visualizing it the whole time, and it was just like so fun to think about. And J.D. Salinger actually wrote that at he wrote part of it at the Valley Forge Military Academy, which is very close to where I grew up in Stratford, Pennsylvania, and it's in Chester, Delaware County, so that's close by.
Yeah. Oh, that's so cool. I had no idea.
So yeah, I'd say Catcher in the Rye is a good one too. But
Yeah.
no, like how it's kind of written, that's usually what I really tend to kind of cling to and like learn from, and how visual I can kind of make it and how I can connect to it, and if it's like really kind of good in that way. Which um but I guess for kids it depends on their sense of humor, and it depends on like what different things they understand. So um uh hmm, yeah so I actually, for our youth lit class, I actually did purchase a lot of books, and I remember you said that you liked when morning comes. I remember you said you liked that one. The thing I really liked it is the various points of view and the various POVs, and that it's like told by like different characters, and it's also kind of something that George R. Martin does in like Game of Thrones. Like each chapter is from like a different character's perspective or a different character arc,
Yeah.
and then they all kind of come and coalesce, and they dovetail into kind of the same interworkings. But changing POVs and getting to hear from like different characters at different times is so interesting. Like that's
Yeah.
so cool, and I'm really glad that uh when Morning Comes does that. I had trouble finding it accessible and kind of putting together the context to it. It was kind of a tough read for me. Like when we read The Akata Witch, that was easier for me to
Yeah.
read.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
But no, the shifting of the POVs and When Morning Comes, I just thought was brilliant. Like
Yeah.
I just thought absolutely brilliant.
And I feel like the shifting POVs is like it can be done really poorly where like you get confused about which character's point of view you're in because they all sound the exact same. So when it's done well, it's like so engaging and really exciting, and you know there's mastery there to switch all of these voices. Yeah, I totally agree. I like remember it being super hard to piece together what was going on, and I think that like that was almost part of why I liked it, was because I was like, I don't know any of this, so I feel like even though I'm confused, I'm learning, and like my confusion is kind of like working itself out, but I am like I have to work to work this out because it is like, well, yeah, and it also goes back to, I guess, a little bit the question of like, who is the book for? Is it a mirror or is it a window? And but with that one, since it's in the 70s, it's probably not a mirror for people who are living through it. It's probably like a window even for modern day kids who live in those places. So I don't know. There's like a lot of different rabbit trails to go on and kind of see where you land with that book.
um, yeah, yeah. I guess I didn't really have enough background going in,
Yeah.
and I didn't really know where Soweto was. So I'd never heard Soweto. I'm not sure how much teaching you guys do the African countries, but um, we didn't learn that much about Africa
Me either.
in school. So we learned about Kenya,
Yeah. Yep.
and
Egypt.
yeah, Egypt, the Middle East, but no like Niger or Gabon or you know
Yeah.
um uh or or Botswana. So I feel like you could go deeper, but I feel like the Middle East was such a big deal in the early 2000s that they're like, okay, we have to talk about it. We have to talk about it. It's so
Yeah. 100%.
important. But it's good to learn about Africa too.
Yeah,
I
absolutely.
heard about some of the other countries and the resources and
Hmm. Really
how,
beautiful, fascinating cultures. I mean, like a lot of turmoil in many of those countries, but
yeah,
also really like a ton of beauty.
yeah, um, yeah, um, yeah, it's interesting. Yeah, um, um, let's see. And have you read and Purple Hibiscus was a book that I read in high school. Have you read Purple Hibiscus?
I haven't, no.
You should check it out. It's really good.
Yeah.
Read it in ninth grade. Very strong female protagonist, and all these like really dramatic, hard-hitting things are kind of happening around her, and she's just kind of watching it unfold. And then you get into her like imagination too, which is really interesting. I thought the book was like really compelling, and it's like really visual. There's a lot of good details. Um, Parts of it are kind of funny. I'm not sure if it's the intention, but it's it's a heavy book. Like it's a
Yeah.
really, really, really dramatic book. But um, yeah, Purple Hibiscus. I'll look up the name of the author real quick because I can't remember. Uh, by Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie. I'm probably pronouncing that wrong, but
I know exactly who you mean.
oh, cool. Has she read it? Has she written anything else that you've read?
She's she's written a few things. Did she? I think she wrote Things Fall Apart. No, maybe not. But she's written a few different books. I haven't actually read anything by her, but like she's definitely on my list, and just haven't
Mm,
gotten around to it because it's a long list. Um, but yeah, she's like very celebrated.
that's cool. Uh, um, mm, yeah. Mm, 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 um, yeah. Um, um, uh, yeah. No. Yeah. There was also a really good book. I think it came out like the first Mrs. Rothschild. I'm not sure if you heard of
I
that one.
haven't read that one either, but I heard it was really good. I remember
It's
like
awesome.
my manager read it and like really loved it. Yeah.
I think kids could read it.
Okay. Oh, cool. Yeah.
Probably high school.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's really visual, and I really like the way it's written. I like the POV. I feel like you're getting some really good present um I feel like you're really getting into the mind of the character like really well, and you
Yeah,
really believe it. Like you really believe what's happening.
that's awesome.
So um yeah, just having that strong character to kind of take you through the story is really cool.
Yeah,
Um
yeah,
and also another one with a strong uh female protagonist too,
yeah.
which is good. Yeah. Um and I'd probably put House on Mango Street in there too. I'm
I
not
was
sure
gonna
if
say that one. Yeah.
okay.
Yeah, I actually, so I did competitive acting in high school, and I actually used that for one of my pieces. And it was one that I really connected to. So I think it's like it's a good one for a lot of reasons. Well, especially like where I grew up in Kansas, is like 30% Latino. So that was just like a lot of people were familiar, like very familiar with Latino culture. So that was one thing. And then another thing was, yeah, I just like really connected to like the coming of age aspects of it. It was just like a really beautifully written book.
Um yeah, the way it kind of gave you snapshots of what was going on in the city from like a kid's perspective, I thought was really cool. So
Yeah.
that really and written in the vignettes, I thought very digestible, very readable, and yeah, I really enjoyed it. I think it still holds up pretty well.
Oh
So
yeah, I agree. Um, so I actually probably should scoot. I know you probably need to get going soon too, but if there's any like follow-up things you want to discuss, yeah, definitely just let me know what works best for you.
um yeah, uh mm, um uh yeah, yeah, like um if like uh if maybe another time you want to compare notes on our our time spent at the juvenile detention center, because I think I told you some of the stuff I was doing, but I didn't give you a lot of details. So
Yeah.
I could probably go a little bit more into depth, and you could probably tell me to some of the more things that maybe the programming
Yeah,
that
absolutely. That'd be great.
um um yeah, cool. So maybe in like 2 or 3 weeks or something like that.
Yeah, that would be perfect. I'm going to go see some friends for the 4th of July. So once I get back, I'm getting back the 7th. So anytime after that would be great.
Cool. Um uh mm, cool. Sounds good.
Awesome.
Thank you, Mindy.
Yeah, thank you. It was really great to talk and catch up. And you gave me, excuse me, you gave me like a lot of really interesting things to think about too. So this is a really great conversation.
No, it's also great to hear from someone who's a teacher and like who like gets that experience of the relationship between the teacher and the students, and like how the students like perceive things, and then how you generate lessons thinking about years in advance, and like what you're going to learn this year and what you're going to learn next year, something like that, and how those
Wild.
kind of feed into each other and how they build and like things like that.
Thanks.
I think that's really interesting. Because like in high school for me, it was like all like ability level depended on like what types of things, but on certain levels they're just like, okay, you're just gonna learn this information, and then depending on your ability level we'll give you higher grades. So
Yeah, yeah.
but that makes sense because they want to make it fair.
Right.
So
Yeah.
um but like for environmental science, they just had like one class. For like physics, they had like 3 different levels. They had academic, accelerated, honors, and then AP. So I guess they technically had like 4. So yeah. Uh um uh yeah, cool. Thank you, Mindy.
Yeah, thank you. Have a great evening, Drew. It's good to see you.
Thanks.